Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to Tapas Project Shaala final day. It gives me great pleasure to be hosting the panel discussion. We will begin with a quick understanding of what Tapas is.
Once upon a time, there was a kingdom like no other. A kingdom ruled by its own subjects, with no kings or queens, where the subjects were ably guided by the great warriors of the land who protect them from every threat and enlighten them with precious knowledge that would help them become rulers of their own land. It was a kingdom that did not need a ruler. When the people of this kingdom wish to play, they make their own toys. When they wish to eat, they run their own kitchen and decide on their own menu. When they desire entertainment, they sing their own songs, celebrate their own art forms, and enact their own plays. How harmonious a kingdom would be if all the subjects worked together in unity to build it. Here is a kingdom where there is knowledge not only in its books but everywhere in the air. Here is a kingdom where responsibility is learned and shared. Here is a kingdom like no other.
A warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. I will take the opportunity to introduce our panelists, our very unique panelists. We are joined by Anjali and Pranav. Anjali is a development professional with over a decade of experience in the nonprofit space. While her experience ranges from leading and managing teams, creating communication collateral, designing training modules, and conducting training programs to conduct feasibility studies, her forte lies in qualitative research. She currently holds as an independent consultant with various nonprofit organizations across the country. Anjali endeavors to pursue a PhD in the field of early childhood education. Pranav has a career which spans over 13 years of experience in business, strategy, and operations. He has spent considerable time in startups such as Ola, Swiggy, Ninja Cart, and Navi. Currently, he's part of an early stage startup called Stable Money. They join us today not as these professionals that I have just described, but as parents of our little Naira. We're also joined by Bhavna. Bhavna is a chartered accountant. Um, with over 10 years of experience, in retrospect, what she really did like about her job was the opportunity to coach and mentor those on her team to understand their calling, set goals, and create an action plan to achieve their goals. In pursuit of unschooling her daughter, she worked with the founder of an NGO. She was given the opportunity to co create and co facilitate the program. The irony of the program was that it had nothing to do with children, but work on the belief systems of the parents, something she had learned in her journey as a parent. The success of the program inspired her to get her professional coach certification from ICF. Her work is based on positive psychology, spiritual growth, self reflection, understanding values, questioning belief systems, unlearning, unconditioning, acceptance, and mindfulness. She was a visiting faculty at one of the KFI group schools. She is also passionate about minimalism and has implemented a sustainable lifestyle in her urban home. She is currently pursuing her master's in psychology and master coach certification to continue creating a positive and powerful impact in the lives of people that she crosses paths with. In continuation of her quest to find a learning space that promotes freedom, acceptance, and the joy of learning, she has now created Swadhyaya's learning space. Then we have Dr. Sindhu Wadhwa. She is a senior clinical psychologist and a practicing psychotherapist with over 18 years of clinical experience, providing patients with advanced and effective evidence based treatment programs. Currently, she heads the Department of Therapy for the Mindsmith India, a brain health platform. She is specialized to treat complex mood disorders and spectrum of anxiety disorders using evidence based practices. Adept in assessing the conditions of patients, keeping record of progress, and suggesting powerful solutions. She is committed to reinforcing positive parenting practices through her parenting workshops called Rising Parents. She is also a mental health advisor for Triumph Organ Donation Foundation. She enjoys writing for women's mental health and adolescent protective and preventive health strategies. I'm really, really excited to be introducing our next two panelists who are Tapas learners. Disha Devta, she's always a curious one to always ready to explore, experience, and question. She loves expressing through music, dance, and her own facial expressions. She's extremely empathetic, and this makes her mindful of everything and everyone around her. She enjoys everything from a roller coaster to chocolates. Then we have Riya Trivedi, again a tapas learner. She loves reading and writing. She is interested in recreational math. And recently, she's showing more interest in immune systems, dance, piano, biology, and origami. Wow. Finally, it gives me great pleasure to be introducing our moderator for the panel today, Mansi Zaveri. Mansi is a mom of two and the force behind Kidsstoppress.com, India's most trusted discovery platform for parents. Mansi is the voice of new age discerning Indian parent and has emerged as the first and strongest influencer in the parenting and baby care space. She was awarded World 40 Under 40 content and lends her voice in supporting of simplifying parenting for the busy Indian parent. Mansi has hosted India's first parenting original podcast on Geo Savan and Parenting Zindagi on Red FM and continues to run two exclusive podcasts. I'm Not Bored for Children and Kids Top Press podcasts for today's busy parents. She has recently launched her first book, The Parents I Met, which is an anthology of her authentic conversations with parents of successful individuals who made it big against all odds. She also successfully runs KSP Book Club community that unites more than 500 parents who are looking to raise readers. And with that, I welcome the very, very prominent, eminent panel for today's discussion. Over to you, Mansi. Mansi, you're muted.
Yes. Disha and Ria, with everything that Preeti has said, I also love chocolates and I also love roller coasters. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and I'm so grateful for each one of you to be here. I think the whole objective of this discussion is to really detach the labels that we've all been introduced with. I think what's common between each one of us here today is that we are looking at a new dimension of education, especially for our little ones. Some of y'all have been brave in doing that, in taking that step and understanding the whys of it. We have two really, really articulate, curious learners today, Disha and Ria. I'm very excited to chat with you. We have experts in Dr. Sindhu and Bhavna in sharing the insights with that. And of course, Anjali and Pranav, parents who've, been fighting against all odds to kind of follow your heart. I'm going to start with you, Preeti. Um, why tapas and what's been your journey to tapas? If you have to just really sum this up for us.
Very quickly, I've been in the field of education for more than 2 decades now. And what I realized is that, of course, we need to change the way we've been learning. I don't think the content has changed from 18th century, and we have 19th century teachers teaching 20th century students for 21st century skills, and that's just mind blowing. So I just felt that a space had to be created that walks the talk. I've been doing a lot of trainings, workshops, conferences, but setting up a space which could act as a model school that would enable this kind of transformation in education was the idea behind Tapas. When we looked at what should be the philosophy of Tapas, we realized there are quite a lot of jargons and theories and philosophies available out there. But what is most contextual in today's world was project-based learning, which allows the learners to immerse themselves in today's contextual, relevant, current information. And so that's what we are doing at Tapas.
Right. Ria and Disha, if you have to sum up, what does Tapas do? And as learners of Tapas, what would you articulate it as? What would you share?
So what does Tapas do? Yeah,
Yes.
well, it's basically a project-based school which helps you learn at your own pace. Like, there's no need to keep rushing along with the teacher who's writing things on the whiteboard and then rubbing it off immediately. You can take some time, you can think about the problems, and well, you can try to understand them as a whole instead of
Amazing.
just, well, rote memorization and all that. So what I like about tapas is that you can learn at your own pace. There's no hurrying, but of course you need to keep up a little.
Yeah. Amazing. Disha, do you want to add anything?
So what tapas is good at? So what I mean is that tapas is a student-led school, and it is a school that is perfect, and you can learn at your own pace, like Ria said. It has a lot of things you can do. It it has interesting learning, has some self-learning facts, and there are all different things. So tapas is a variety of things all mixed together.
Just listening at these 9 and 10-year-olds, I'm only thinking, did what was I doing? I was shivering, speaking up at the elocution competition in my school, and I wanted to hide somewhere. And these guys are on a global conference trying to share their views on their education system. How many of us are feeling like this is already transforming education? Like I am
Absolutely.
at it, right?
True.
Wow, amazing. Anjali and Pranav is missing in action, but Anjali, I want to ask you a little bit about your journey as a parent and why you even here? Like why? Like what's the story and why should we have Anjali and Pranav here talking with us?
Sure. So I think as parents, I think Sindhu asked us how we're doing with parenting, and we were like, "Can you see us? Like this is how we are on a Sunday morning, like feeling completely out of it, but still trying to be like awake and sort of here for this conference." So that's one part of it. But to be very honest, as in our journey towards tapas, at least towards project-based learning, was primarily because we didn't want Naira to go down the whole route of traditional schooling where there's a lot of rote memorization. Like I think my journey with schooling was very very traumatic. Like every time I think of exams, my hands start shivering and my heart starts pounding. All the things that Ria was mentioning, she was feeling before this. I still have stage fright. I still have so many things. So I think that I knew that I was suffering from a lot of these things, and I wanted to ensure that Naira didn't have those things happening. Where the process was most important about how to learn something, why something is important, as opposed to what that end product could be. So I somehow, again, it's because parenting is not a solo journey, right? It's a two person journey. It's and we stay with family as well, so it's a family journey. So it's convincing a lot of people as to why we want a particular piece of a particular style of parenting, a particular style of education for Naira. So
Right.
yes, that's why we're here.
And if I may ask you, what do you and Pranav do? Like, what's your background?
Okay, so I'm a development professional, and I've been working in this space for close to a decade now. And
Okay.
I sort of passionate about early childhood education as well. So I've been like I have a diploma in early childhood education, and I want to do a PhD in this space at some point. So that has also sort of led me to read more about what works with children, what doesn't, and things like that. And Pranav works with an early stage startup called Stable Money, and he's been in the startup space for again close to a decade now.
Okay, sure. Um, Dr. Sindhu, coming to you,
Hmm.
um, what are the problems or what are the anxieties that parents face before they take the leap into a different sort of or differentiated learning journey, and and how do they kind of turn around and how is that transformation been?
So I think the first thing we need to do is do away with alternative as a terminology.
Yes,
This is
yes,
evidence based learning. There
right,
is nothing traditional or alternative because largely and historically, alternative has meant that kids who are broken, problematic, not fitting into the silos are sent to alternative. That's got to stop. And we need to stop using that term alternative to even
right,
change the narrative in the heads of parents. It is evidence based. We know how the brain learns. Now, brain is a cultural organ, contextual organ. So basically, it keeps changing. So imagine there are like billions of neurons, right? The cells in the brain, they are there, but for them to come together and make that connection, they need to be exposed to experiences, data that makes sense to the brain. Now, in self paced learning, very interesting what happens is that the experience, the environment, the setting naturally propel the brain to make that synaptic connections. So
right.
it's brilliant. Now the problem begins that parents don't know that or parents are not used to it. I'll tell you an interesting case. A 14-year-old girl with attention issues was sent to me. Now, her school has said we can't keep her in our traditional school. We'd like her to go to an alternative school. She was taken to the alternative school where she walked around, got distracted by things, and she overall loved how her brain was responding. I was happy with the emotional progress she was making in therapy as well. Problem started that parents, towards the coming of exams, they started panicking. We don't have the textbooks. We don't know what kind of questions she'll be asked. What happens when the 10th board exams come? And how will she make the decisions? Now, the dissonance between parents who are anxious because they have been exposed to traditional systems and the children who are now being exposed to a very different psychosocial environment, that dissonance and the conflict that causes changes in learning and the impact of learning. That's one. So it is very important for parents to be educated first before children are educated. And that's a famous line is that parenthood is so sneaky. You think you are bringing a little child into the world and raising the child, but little do you know you are raising yourself alongside it.
Of course, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
So anxieties do play up. But what self directed learning really helps with is there's an interesting word for Disha and Ria. It's called locus of control. What it means is that imagine a thermostat, like a geyser. Now, the regulator of the geyser that decides the temperature of the water is outside. So anybody who goes and passes that regulator keeps changing it. So the temperature keeps going up, keeps coming down, anyone can change it. That's what happens in traditional methods. The feedback, the external feedback and reward mechanism becomes the locus of control. The grades, the report cards, the PTMs, the career choices, decision making. Now move to a school like Tapas, where because it's project based, the autonomy or how they beautifully described in the video kingdom, that locus of control is within the children. They are intrinsically motivated to pursue something that is of meaning to them. And that is, Mansi, the biggest indicator of mental health or good health and good life. And this is why I feel parents need to be raised first. Kids, all right.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Bhavna, moving on to you, a chartered accountant, and now doing all the amazing things that you're doing. I know, like in the growing up years, just being a CA meant so much of anxiety. Whether you've made the cutoff, how many attempts have you taken to clear your CA, and all of that, right? I have to admit that I appeared for the foundation, the CA foundation course. I cleared it, and then when I saw the books for inter CA, I was like, this cannot be me. This cannot be my future. And I said, I'm not doing this. Luckily, I had the locus control in my hand, and I told my parents, because I was already much older by then. I said, don't push me to do something I don't want to do. So from something that's, that's as coveted as being a CA, where the pass percentage is so minimal, to doing what you're doing today in the learning space is really commendable. Tell me, what made that shift come about, and for parents who are still ambitious about their kids pursuing a really competitive exam, or pursuing degrees that are fiercely competitive, how can educators or learners, like Dr. Sindhu said, or like Disha and Ria said, join or blend in, rather, in that competitive path? Sorry, lots of questions together, but yes.
Yeah, but thank you, Mansi. I mean, thank you for acknowledging the efforts we put in just to clear the exam. But I think Anjali covered one point that was so interesting, right? Exam anxiety and school being traumatic. Also, the other thing that happened at school for me was the whole experience was traumatic, right? And
Yeah.
so when I was doing CA, although there was exam anxiety, what really helped me was the internship. I had to work for 3 years to qualify. And when I was in
Yes.
my first corporate job and I grew and I started taking interviews, it became very clearly evident who really did their internship and took it seriously and who just, did it for the sake of doing it. And even at work, the way I grew was just because of what I did during the internship and not what I studied for the exams. There was that. And then, so that was a blessing in disguise for, doing CA actually taught me that. I think when Arundhati came along, the first thing that happened was the feeling that, oh, I don't want to send her to school, and then what's the alternative? And so we got to looking at unschooling, homeschooling. But the very interesting part was I didn't have to think, because she was just leading the way. She decided what she wanted to do, and all I had to do was like follow that lead, right? It's anxiety inducing in the beginning. I mean, you're not used to this. You don't know. You've always grown up hearing, what does the child know, right? But when we saw it, and we were also lucky that we hit the pandemic when she was 10 months old, so there was like least intervention, and we started growing with her. And the whole journey of going through that unconditioning ourselves and watching her grow was like so beautiful that I felt I wanted to contribute more to the space, and the events that followed did allow me to do that. And I'm very grateful for what happened. In terms of, parents like wanting to, or parents who are still worried about children having to do those competitive exams, or children having to, go through this path of schooling and then college and, whatever the regular path is that's laid out for us. I think anytime that I meet a parent, the first question I ask is, how much of what you did in the 21 years of school and college are you using in your life and work today? Right? That's the first question I ask. And if the answer is minimum to zero, then they know that this is, a futile journey to put the child through again. And a lot of times, then they ask, like Dr. Sindhu said, what's the alternative? I say, I mean, what you are doing is, you know, the current schooling system um, cannot be considered the norm, right? And what you need to look for is the environment that suits your child. And I always say this, like, for example, I would blindly recommend Tapas to anybody who comes into me, right? But I would also tell the parent to have a chat with either Preethi or Nishanti and also understand their child first. Like, what does your child really like doing? Or, how do you how does your child uh, respond to a situation or an environment? Because I used to work with the Valley last year. And I do remember having one kid in my class who didn't know what to do with all the freedom she had, because she was so, like, she needed structure to thrive, right? and that is okay too. So what kind of an environment gives your child, or what kind of a school gives your child that sort of, attention and understanding to see what your child needs, and accordingly sort of, gives them that sort, the resources and the kind of support to thrive. So I think for parents, it's twofold. One is to understand how much of what they did already is really contributing to what they are doing. And second is to understand their child better and find an environment that supports them.
Right, right, right. I think it's interesting that you asked the question, because I do question sometimes that everything that we did in school, how does it play out? And I'm going to ask Preeti, both you and Dr. Sindhu, this, that everything that we did in the traditional way of learning at school, we're not applying that maybe in a more wholesome manner, but bits and pieces of that comes together in congruence, in different aspects of our lives, right? So example, whether it was the statistics that we did, and or it was the history that we did, or it was the geography, the way we learned, we may not apply it all at one go, but we do apply it at different points of time, in different ways of life, and in different career choices that we make. So, are we saying that everything? I mean, I don't think any of us are saying here that that way of learning was the wrong way of learning.
Right. I think one of the important points you made is the absence of social emotional learning back in our days.
Yeah,
There was no awareness, reflection, metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. So
yeah,
there was nothing like that. We were not asked to reflect on what our thoughts were. Uh, Now, with systems like Tapas has created, there is such an opportunity for social emotional awareness and growth in a very safe environment. Children need safety, consistency, and they do need for their brains to grow due to stimulation. Now, I am not saying I'm going to slam everything we learned. But the moment the power distance between learners and teachers are reduced, do you realize we couldn't talk to our teachers, or we had such a power distance? Now the learners and adults or teachers are learning together. That in itself, the reduction of power distance has created a better learning environment. Then resilience. We learned resilience much later in life, and therefore we our first setback was that much more harsher. I noticed how all of you use the word traumatic. The word trauma itself was used. I can assure you these children may not use that, because to them setbacks will become a very natural part of going through everyday life. So resilience, locus of control, autonomy, connectedness, meaning, these are the pillars on which these kids will grow. So, without slamming our system, I think we are coming up. I mean, we are evolving, right? So, definitely this system is better. The only advantage I saw of our system was, I think, a forced sense of discipline that we resented, but we complied with.
yes. But
And
it makes me wonder, because you mentioned two very interesting things. One is resilience, and one is the social emotional reflection. And and it's been a topic of discussion for many, where we're seeing that this generation is far more fragile emotionally, while they're reflecting a lot more. We're raising a more fragile emotionally, a more emotionally fragile generation. And the second is the lack of resilience and grit, because they seem to be not failing forward at
yeah,
all. Quitting seems to be an easier option.
yeah,
So and this has been a conversation across the board, across
you're
recruiters,
right.
across parents, across educators, that this generation doesn't seem to have. And of course, both Disha and Ria
I
are
have
very, very young for it. But how do you inculcate
I
that?
have slightly different and perhaps unpopular opinion on this. I feel that what these kids are going through is, in psychology, we call it over justification effect. What it basically means is the kid likes to play with a toy. Now, the kid starts playing with their toy. You come in and say, "Oh my God, you are so amazing with the toy. Amazing, brilliant." You heap praises on the child. The intrinsic motivation reduces over a period of time for the child to play with the same toy. What is happening here is we are over indulging, over involving ourselves in creating motivation. Leave them be, give them a dabba, an Amazon box, they will create a time machine out of it. That's how children's brains are. But what happens is every time they make a line drawing, a stick figure, we come in and say, amazing, my child has made this drawing, put it in the fridge. There is no one of the parents I was talking to, and they kept saying, but I appreciate my child. I keep telling, good boy, good girl. I said, no, they don't know what they're good at. So you look at a drawing and say, I like the way you have drawn this particular thing. It reminds me of this. And so, like, good drawing. A generic blanket praise is going to harm the children more. The millennials have done this. They have just given participation awards and badges of honor to every person who showed up. So, fragility that you're questioning may have come from that. But I assure you, Mansi, I am of a belief that these kids are going to enjoy learning so much that the idea of trauma won't be associated with learning.
So, if I
And
can add
Hmm.
into that,
yes,
uh,
please.
Hmm.
uh, I think, yes, definitely in terms of overcompensating for how we were not praised, we are doing that a lot more to our.
Yeah,
And I agree with you, Sindhu, that specific praise and praising of the process is more important than the product.
yeah,
While saying that, I think it's also important to know that today's parents are also removing obstacles from the children's life. Like, I
correct.
don't want my child to face any obstacle. They fall down, it's an event. And I mean, in fact, I think with social media, we are documenting things that don't need documentation. The number of pictures, things that we put up.
Yeah.
So having said all of that, I think the kind of system of education that we are trying to grow is to provide those opportunities to fail and learn from that failure,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
actually feel that yes, I'm not capable of this, so I need to equip myself with the skills to become better at something. And that's the kind of balance we need to give with this kind of overcompensation that we've done. So
Hmm.
providing those opportunities to really try hard at something and then fail at something, and that's
Yeah,
important. And we have this
absolutely.
poster in school that Disha and Ria maybe remember. They can say, I don't know yet is the operative word. So yet is something that we, the power of yet is
That's
something that,
brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that word.
yeah.
Disha and Ria, what are all these adults talking about? Can you even follow? Like, are we making any sense? Yes, Disha.
So, the power of yet is something we use a lot in the school. So, if you say,
Yes.
I can't do it, someone has to come and say, you can't do it yet. I think we have one poster in the library saying the power of yet.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Interesting.
We
Interesting. Disha,
always end
what
up
do you,
using it.
right. What do you love about this power that you have, which a lot of your other friends who go to various different schools, have like, what are conversations between you and your friends? Like, are they feeling like your school is cooler? Do you feel like their school is cooler? Like, what do you love about the way they learn, and what do they love about the way you learn?
Well, I like about the way they learn is that there are different methods of learning, and only one of them won't make you learn a lot. And what they like about my school is also kind of which is very weird. They're like, "Oh, you don't have uniform. You eat lunch at school. You don't have to bring it." They're very surprised. They're
Okay.
like, "You're lucky. You don't have exams. You don't have homework every day." They just say that all the time, and I'm like, "Wow, I am super lucky to have that."
Right. Are you curious what are exams like? Do you know what that will be like? Do you want to give an exam?
No. Well,
Okay.
I all I wanted to say about other kids is that because they have exams, they keep asking questions to try to prove that they're smarter, like that.
Ah, yeah.
That-
Right. Yes, Ria.
When you mentioned exams, I wanted to say I have been learning math from a very small age. So my parents enrolled me in various math olympiads, and sometimes, so that's kind of like an exam. I mean, it is an exam. So I get a little stressed, but not that much because it's not that important. It's not gonna make like a very big life decision for me. You only got a participation award in this. Yeah, you're not going to college. Nothing's gonna happen.
Wow, Ria. So profound, so amazing.
And I
Right.
think this is proof of raising resilient children, right? They're not result oriented. And the
Yes.
whole idea of success is sort of just redefined for them, right? They're enjoying the process. And there's no necessity for being perfect. There's no necessity for, nailing something the first time, or like, having to achieve something. It's just the journey. And I think that's what builds resilience.
Right. No, I completely agree, and it's so interesting to hear that. I want to ask, obviously the educators here and the fellow parents as well. We're talking of kids who are relatively younger. Yes, sorry, Disha, before I move on, why don't you ask me a question or say something?
Well, it's not a question. I just wanted to share about the topic that we were just talking about like few
Yes.
seconds ago, the power of yet. We had a big event on that. It was the Rubik's Cube challenge, where there was this big chart put in the library where it said everyone's names, and there were three attempts, and everyone got to solve the Rubik's Cube in each attempt. And there were a lot of people who won and lost, a lot of people who signed out because they thought they couldn't, and it was very stressful. And in the sports day, they had given the rewards, and I was surprised that since I participated, I got the reward of best effort shown.
Lovely. That's amazing. So, what does stress feel like? What is stress? And
It's
when do you get stressed out?
like when you like get how do I explain, like very cramped up in the space. You can't just like
Wow.
loose and get out.
Can I hire you, Disha?
I'm like, I'm
Called
really going
dibs.
back to 9 years. I don't even know what that felt like. Okay, Ria,
Yeah.
you raised your hand.
Yes, so for me, stress feels like that sometimes it happens like when my homework is due tomorrow and it's already 7 in the night. I'm like, I have to do this right now. So
Yeah,
it basically feels like your heartbeat is going fast, maybe you're sweating, and that's how I feel. That's before I don't know, do a speech or anything like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
right, right. And tell me, when you guys feel this, what do you do next? Like, and what do you do to avoid? Because obviously you have Tapas as an educator who's not going to put you on the spot, but you need to deliver that in time. So how do you handle? How does the teacher handle it? How do you guys handle it? How do the parents handle it? Yes, yes, yes. Come on. One of you go first. Yes, Ria, go first.
okay, so this is how I handle it. If I get stressed, I just think that after this, it's gonna be okay. Nobody's gonna think about anything. So, like, I think what I'm gonna do after. So, if I'm giving a speech, then I'm thinking that after this, I'll go with my mother on a long ride on the bike, and it'll be fun. And then it just helps me relax. That nothing's gonna happen.
Okay. And how do your parents react in that situation that you have homework due tomorrow and it's 7 p.m. already?
I just tell them that I have homework due, and they're like, "Okay, do it." And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I
And what
mean,
happens if you haven't finished it? What happens next day at school?
um, one of my, I don't know, I like doing homework, but and that's why I don't want to be the person who always forgets homework. I mean, I want to have a good record in that, basically.
Okay.
So
Amazing.
even if I have to do my homework at 9:30 p.m. in the night, I'll do it.
Amazing, amazing.
I
Disha,
am.
you take.
So many times.
May I say something here, Mansi? Just 1 minute.
Yes,
I'm amazed at how self regulated they are. So, you were
I
talking
was
to
just
them
going to
about
say that.
stress, the idea of stress. So, the moment the nervous system is stressed, the ability to come back to equilibrium or bring it back to a state of homeostasis is what determines the resilience, emotional health, mental health of an individual. I'm noticing these guys see a heightened response to stress, and then they give themselves a regulatory mechanism, then bring it down. Now,
Yes,
this is what we need. This is
yes, I
exactly what we need for good emotional and mental health. So,
agree.
bravo, kids.
And
I'm
the
really
second,
proud of all of you.
the
Right.
other thing that Dr. Sindhu had earlier said about intrinsically being motivated, and I think
Yeah.
that's what came out from what Ria was saying, right? When Mansi
Yes.
asked what happens at school the next day, it wasn't about what happens at school, it's about how she feels about not doing the homework, and she is motivated to do it. There's no consequence as such. I
Yeah,
think
Correct.
that's
I
brilliant.
was just wanting to bring that out. That it also shows me that she's a self learner, and that
Yes.
discipline, that grit. And like Dr. Sindhu said earlier, that some of us were forced into that. We went through forced discipline. That discipline already exists, and that's what I was gauging for. And yes,
Yeah.
this.
You're on mute.
Yeah. So, what I do when I get like stressed, like I usually don't get too stressed when I do homework. It's mostly when I have to give big speeches like this. Like after, like what I do after, like Ria said, she goes on the bike with her mom. I usually do. I have this step of instructions that I have planned in my mind. It's a short form that I'm saying now. It's called SWDB.
Okay, what does that stand for?
S stands for sit. W stands for wash face to calm me down.
Wow.
And D stands for drink. And B stands for breathe.
Disha,
SWDB.
how did you learn this? This is amazing.
Well, a long time ago, I remember seeing this, like this small clip that I had seen in one of the apps I had, where this kid, where people kept making fun of her as her hair, the way she looks, and all. So she had this step of instructions that helped her calm her down because of her anger issues. So because of that, I thought I could plan my own.
Hmm.
Amazing. I was
Amazing.
so nervous that I just drank water and I'm gonna breathe. Okay, so I can SWDB. It's gonna be my new mantra, and it's going up on my wall, and I'm gonna give you credits for it every time I use that. This it's amazing.
Is it
Um,
okay for me to feel this emotional right now? I'm just gloating at this point.
Absolutely. You have a right to.
you should, Preeti, and I'm gonna ask you the next question, which is when parents come to you, and guys, I have to say this, and I must confess, I have a set of questions. I haven't gone back or changed tab even once because this conversation is just flowing. And I hope Preeti doesn't kill me at the end of it that you haven't asked any of the questions that we are actually supposed to be asking. But I am just absolutely enjoying this conversation. I'm sure everybody who is watching is going to immensely, immensely benefit from this. Preeti, I'm going to ask you as an educator, what are the two types of parents who come to you and at what ages? And the reason I ask types of parents, there must be one who must be very clear, like Disha's parents, Riya's parents, Anjali and Pranav, or Bhavna. And then there could be another set of parents, because these parents, in my opinion, are very aware, they're very conscious,
Yes.
right? And another set of parents who believe in the tapas way of education but are not ready to take the plunge because it's a decision. And one of the things that I find most scary about parenting, and I can say that just out of all of these younger parents here versus me, is I constantly feel I am making sometimes irreversible decisions for my child, And I just hope that it pans out well in the long run. Anjali, Pranav, Bhavna, do you guys agree, disagree sometimes? It's just intuitive because it's not your life or your decision, but I just hope it works out well for my child in the long run of the decision that I'm making. I want to ask you, Preeti, what are the sets of parents who come to you, and what are their anxieties when they come to you?
uh, like you said, there are a couple of types of parents, and some of the parents have done their research. They've really invested time in going through what they want, and like Anjali was mentioning earlier, understanding their child, and like Bhavna was saying, just that alignment of what the school believes in and what the parents believe in. Um, they've done all of this and they come in to meet us, so it's a great conversation that we have then. There are also some parents who know that they don't want the same kind of education that they went through, but they don't know what they want for their child. So they've come in with not know with knowing what they don't want, but they need to be nudged, guided, asked the right questions to kind of understand what they want for their child. Of course, we do have parents who come in thinking that this will be a typical conventional kind of a school also, and they are a little disappointed that we don't have textbooks and, like Disha said, no homework and no exams. So those are parents obviously where the conversations are really short and they're like, oh, okay, so you don't have these, then we this is not for us. um, our way of connecting with the parents, we have realized, is having very long open houses conversations the first time the parent comes in, as opposed to a school who says my application form is published, go ahead and apply. Instead of that, we have conversations sometimes which last over 4 hours a day into 3 days, and that's how parents really immerse themselves in how we learn together at Tapas.
Interesting that you say that. Dr. Sindhu, I'm going to ask you this question. Um, are we, and because Anjali and Bhavna mentioned this, because they had a traumatic learning experience, which their child may or may not have, as someone who's very conscious, is it right for me as a parent to understand that my child may or may not have a similar experience, but because I am still working with my inner child who had a very traumatic learning experience, I'm choosing this path because it's coming out of my own need without understanding what my child actually needs?
That's a very interesting point you make, that are we compensating for something we went through? Or are we doing from a mindful, conscious perspective, looking at our child and their needs? Now, an analogy that comes to my mind is, imagine growing a private rose garden in the middle of a wild forest. Now, great idea. You could plant, make the soil bed, put the stems in, even water it while you're there. And then at night, coyotes come, dig up the soil. Then too much sunlight sometimes, or torrential rain, and the rose garden gets trampled over and it's ruined. Then you go back to either doing it again, taking the weeds out. Now, the process of compensation is a lot like this. It is like growing this private rose garden in the middle of a forest. While you're working on your demons, your barriers, you will find yourself always compensating. That can't be a balanced perspective to decide whether your child needs a certain format of education. Your child is the biggest indicator. And I think Bhavna had mentioned it, that you look at the child and decide where the child needs to go. So you get the child prepared for the road rather than prepare the road for the child.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
this is what is very important, that not, all of us need to be conscious. I love the terminology conscious parent that you speak so much about, because while there are 100 kinds of pop psychology terms, being conscious and mindful and present is all that the child is going to remember.
If I
Nothing
may, I,
else.
oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I thought you were
Yeah.
done, Dr. Sindhu.
No, no, I'm
Um,
done. Yes.
Okay, sure. So thank you so much for that question, Mansi, because sometimes it does, like this question does pop up quite a couple of times from other parents that, that we interact with, and maybe even family members saying that, hey, listen, like you've had a traumatic experience. Are you like, copping out and saying that, hey, no competition, no this, no anxiety, and you put her in a completely like secluded environment? Is that what you're trying to do? But I think, so a lot of the readings that we were doing and a lot of the research that we ended up doing before choosing Tapas, we were very sure that we understood what are the foundational concepts of learning.
Yeah.
So the foundational years of learning are also the first 6 years, which means that if I make Naira like go into the whole rote learning method of mugging things up, all things that we did and we were forced to do, learning to write before she even understands what writing is, learning to even write before she even understands how to hold the pencil. Her fine motor skills aren't even developed enough to get there. So it's so strange that when I actually started reading about it and telling people, hey, these are the things that I'm mindful of, that they also started coming back and telling us that, hey, like our fingers right now are slightly bent in weird ways, and it's not like, they actually started noticing these things and actually voicing it out. So that's one. Secondly, another point that you had mentioned earlier, I'm sort of connecting them all together when you're talking about resilience, talking about a lot of things that children go through. I think what Bhavna said was actually really right, in the sense that we're responding to children. We're not telling them what to feel. We're also creating some sort of a safe space for them to come back home and, like sometimes days, like even though she goes to Tapas, there are days I think she's so maybe well behaved in school, like for her maybe she's sort of keeping it together inside. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. When she comes home, it's she lets loose. She's like this wild child at home. And for me to, I mean, for any of us at home to respond to that, you have to be calm. You have to sort of like bring it all in and be like, okay, I'm here, I'm not going to lose it, I'm going to be calm, and I'm going to like take it all in. And I think that response is what kids require as well, because when I do that, as opposed to me getting angry at her saying that, why you getting angry, why you crying, why you doing this, then I think it sets off a very wrong chain reaction, because then that whole evening is spoiled for her. We're not able to calm down, she's not able to calm down. It's like a very bad like back and forth that's happening. So I think responding to children is also really important, like figuring out, hey, you're going through something, let's do this together, let's figure out what exactly is happening, and sort of find a solution together. That
No,
again is really helpful because of what they've been teaching her at Tapas as well. Because there are these days she comes back and she does these mindful tactics. I think that there's something that she does, and she teaches her how to breathe at home. She's like, I'm going to breathe now. So I was like,
you know,
okay,
it's so interesting that these kids are talking about breathing. They know how to regulate the breath. The only time I think I was taught how to breathe was when I was going to get into labor in my prenatal classes. Is that weird that we were actually taught breathing only then?
Yeah,
Ria,
during crisis, right?
yeah, I think Ria and Disha are going to laugh at my analogies. But Bhavna and Anjali, I have to ask you these questions that. And it's something that stems from, maybe it's a personal question, and maybe Preeti can answer that as well. Are we talking of a fraction? What's okay? Let me re-articulate that. Is the tapas way of education, and actually the more needed education system that we need today for our children and for our learners, something where it is time consuming for the parent?
Hmm. Can I go
So,
first?
okay.
I think this is going to be the norm of the future. One, I think we're at the threshold of a change in the education system in India. This paradigm shift that's going to happen. We will all be forced to do this, whether we like it or not. Some of us don't have the capabilities of making this shift, and we might be like how it happened during the pandemic. You saw certain people really thrived during that time, and certain people had it very difficult. I think that is going to be us in the next for the next 10 years. So we as a parenting community need to make more conscious efforts to equip ourselves to deal with this kind of a VUCA world. So yeah, I think that's my take. It's exciting times, also propelled by one, I think the pandemic that happened. Two, I think the national education policy that came out in 2020, which is forcing and catalyzing the change that's happening in the education industry. So expect that you will be pleasantly surprised. I see schools are already making that shift, are already looking at becoming more child centric. So it's fair warning right now to parents. So expect that your children will question more. They are going to require more of your time, because it's no longer going to be passive learning. It will be active learning.
Interesting. Anjali, Bhavna.
So I think I'm going to change that the term that you use instead of saying time consuming, I'm going to change it to investing your time in your child's education, because I think it makes my mind immediately go there, because I don't think I'm wasting, or rather like consuming. Again, there is that time which I would probably be doing multiple other things, but I mean I'm choosing to invest that time in my child's learning. So if she asks me a question, instead of saying, "Hey, go figure it out," even though she's 3 years old and 3 months, she has a lot of questions. I think it's the inquisitiveness that we need to immediately sort of try and answer to or respond to. So instead of giving her the answer, also sometimes we say, "Hey, think about it a little. Like, you've asked us a question. Why don't you look around, try and figure out what is happening?" Like she was reading this book the other day, just to sort of quip like a small little anecdote. So she was asking us about an iceberg. She was reading about an iceberg, and she said, "Amma, what exactly happens when?" So I was telling her about the surface temperature, something that we read in the news. So it's explaining the El Nino effect. Agreed, it's probably a lot of high end things that we're telling her, but we were just trying to read what the news what news is going on right now. So then she was like, "What is an iceberg? What happens when it melts?" So I said, "Okay, let's go see what happens when it melts." So we took a little bit of ice, put it in a bowl, and we said, "Okay, so what's happening? The water is it's melting. Okay, what happens when it melts? There's some conversion happening." So the thing is, when we're doing something like that, she's noticing what we're doing. She's trying to look at learning also in a very different form. We're not giving her the answer straight off, saying that, "Hey, this is what happens. Ice becomes water, and therefore, that whole global warming and all of that." We're sort of taking a slightly different approach, which I've also realized is what she likes. Whereas if I was just telling her what is happening, she's just mugging up information, and this information might not actually retain for very long, because it's just facts.
Yeah,
Facts
I
at the end.
understand actually, and I'm going to interrupt there to just understand. We're talking of an ideal case scenario, and I know that this is what we would all want to do. The question is, how many of us today, when both parents are working 10 to 7, sometimes 10 to 8, are we being able to, because we're really talking of an idealistic situation, are we being able to do this? Is the question, right? And today we're talking of parents who are extremely educated. Let's also understand that somebody may not be able to answer those questions as articulately. So are we talking of a parent who needs to first learn, then address that curiosity? Again, I keep coming back to this, that here we're talking of a very, very conscious lot who understands even the term and the phrase between consuming and investing. Yes, we would want to invest, but as a parent, I mean, I can speak for a lot of the parents as well, because if I'm working 7 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, I mean, I don't know if I am that stretched rubber band at all point in time, if I am being able to make that investment. So again, I understand that's an idealistic situation. So Bhavna, over to you. Do you feel like it is for somebody who's extremely conscious and is ready to invest that sort of time? You're on mute.
Mansi, you were right when you said it was an idealistic situation. And a lot of people come back to me saying yours is an ideal situation and hence you're able to do it, which is fair, right? But I also come from the point of view that to live is to learn, okay? And that living can happen anywhere in any amount of time. You work from 10 to 8, 10 to 7, whatever your timings are. If you're able to spend that morning 7 to 8 with your child, or night, whatever time with your child, it doesn't have to be an entire day. It doesn't have to even be an
I
entire
agree.
hour. Sometimes the 20 minutes that you spend with the child. Maybe you're cooking in the kitchen, let the child wash the dal, right? Whatever the case may be, include the child in what you're doing and be absolutely present, even if it is 15 minutes a day. And that could
Yeah.
be someone's ideal, and that's absolutely fine. And that's investment enough in raising emotionally resilient children, who are developing this keenness to learn, to live, to understand,
But
to be
do you
curious,
feel
right?
so I hear you. My question again is that I am doing that as a parent. My question again would be, does it require an an extended amount of time for my child to be learning in this transformative education environment? So I am giving that extra 15 minutes, I'm giving that 1 hour undivided attention, but I'm not following a structure. So does that mean that's extra effort, extra time? And maybe Preeti, perhaps you can answer that. Ria was a child who was homeschooling. Why did her parents pull her from homeschooling to Tapas?
To answer the first part, I think it doesn't require extra time. I think it just like the word that we've all used, consciousness, mindfulness. These are the things that we need to keep in mind. And if you're doing that, whatever amount of time, like Bhavna was saying, that's sufficient. And for the in terms of I think the transition that happened with Ria from being a
Yeah.
homeschooler to coming into Tapas, there were many factors, one of them being that she gets to be in an environment that allows for her social growth and allows
Yeah.
for her to be mingling with peers and
Mm.
working with others, collaborating, etc. So that might be a very huge factor in terms of her having come in. I do see that the parents are as invested today in how Ria is learning as they were when she was homeschooled. So
Right.
I don't think time was a factor, at least
Uh, but
not
you
the.
know, the question that Mansi raises is a very reasonable one, because what she's saying is that if it requires a lot of time, it can also impact the quality of life the adult is leading,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
and we know, aside from all the fantastic and fancy theories in psychology, at the end of the day, it comes down to this:
Yeah.
happier individual make healthier parents,
Absolutely.
everything else aside. So if a parent is happy to assist the child in their curiosity and exploration, thumbs up. I wasn't that person. I didn't want to be too involved, but I wanted, because my child is self-paced, I put him in an environment that supported it. He would come back happier. At the end of every day, we would have 15 to 20 minutes of conversation about friends and life and shows we are watching. That to me was a deeper, intimate relatedness and added to the meaning of his life than anything else. So, again, everybody has to follow who they are. For Anjali, maybe that's what's important. For Bhavna, it could be something else. For me, maybe don't want to assist with science things, and maybe I don't know the answer to the questions they have. But when my child would often come and say, Mom, I'm bored, what can I do? He was 3 or 4. I would say, I can't wait to see what you can come up with. And I let him be bored. And turns out he started writing stories and music, because they have to, he's self-paced. So he needed to come up with his own solutions. So anyway,
Well,
as a parent, I just wanted to share this.
Sure.
Mansi, I'm so sorry to be the one doing this. I hate this, but
Yes.
we are out of time. We're actually 15 minutes ahead, more.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I am so sorry, but I'm going to quickly wrap this up. If everybody just has to say one concluding sentence in just about 30 seconds, and I'm going to let Disha go first, then Ria, then Anjali, then Bhavna, then Dr. Sindhu, and then, of course, Preeti. 30 seconds. Disha, you go first. What do you enjoy about learning? Or if you want to just say anything else.
Well, what I enjoy learning in Tapas is that there are different things. There's theater, there's model making, there's master classes, there's clubs, and there are so much more.
Okay. Ria, you.
Um, One thing I like about tapas is that students have freedom. You can learn at your own pace, and you can also like help making decisions for the school. Like it's not only the teachers who do everything. You can help. So that's why they in tapas we are in clubs. I'm in Green Warriors. That's basically helping sustainability and eco-friendliness. So that's a way
Interesting.
to get freedom and also help with
You
the growth
enjoyed.
of the school.
Okay. Thank you. Anjali.
Yes, so I think we're totally stoked that the Naira's in Tapas, because I think she's becoming a wholesome individual. Like there's so many facets that she's sort of picking up, which like we weren't able to also maybe adhere to. And yes, it's she's definitely coming out really confident, which is amazing. Like we hear, we don't expect, like a lot of our family and friends say that, hey, is she just 3 years and 4 months? She doesn't sound like a 3 years and 4 months little kid, because she has so many things to say. She's very opinionated, and she knows that her voice, she's got a voice, and that needs to be heard no matter what. So yeah, thanks,
Super.
Tapas.
So I think what I like about learning is having a space where I can feel safe and learn at my pace, right? Oh, there you go, another opinionated kid. So um, and what I've also loved doing is creating a space that allows for that, both adults and children. And I've also been very sort of lucky to be associated with spaces like Tapas and Preethi and Nishanti in specific. I think I've been truly inspired by the work they do, and along my journey I happen to meet them. And I think in some way it's also very validating that there are more people doing or working towards creating spaces where people come to enjoy learning rather than worry about the result and be stressed about what they do. I
Right.
think that's what
Thank
I
you.
enjoy most.
Thank you. Dr. Sindhu.
Okay, number one, it has to be more than a pedagogical approach. It has to be a part of the cultural fabric. Relatedness, autonomy, attachment, attunement, all of the fancy things. Look, any education system has to address those. Second, very important thing is that while you're looking at your child and wondering what they're doing with what they're going to do with their life, remember they are looking more keenly at you and looking at what you're doing currently with yours. So make it worthwhile. You be the
Thank you.
model that shapes them up. That's it.
Super. And Preeti, last word from you. I want you to talk about how Tapas is integrating with the NEP and thereon.
First of all, I'd like to say this panel feels like a testimonial for everything that we're doing. So I'm just really happy that this happened. I think we're very grateful that we have one of the authors of NEP on our board of advisors. So we are extremely aligned with the national education policy and the kind of vision that it has for transforming education in India. We are a self-directed space. That means that every child gets to be part of decisions, like Ria was saying. So we are ahead of the bell curve in terms of implementing the NEP. And I think that we will probably be a model school when the policymakers want to come and visit and say that, oh, this is how a school should be when it comes to implementing of NEP. So that's my take on where we are.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Sunday morning with us. And I really hope we all can be curious learners for life like Disha and Ria.
Absolutely. Pleasure being here, Mansi.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Mansi,
Thank
you
you
did
for
a fabulous
having
job
me.
today.
Thank you
Ria,
so much.
Disha.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
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 Oh, that was a fantastic panel discussion. I know we've overshot our time that we had allocated. Our next speaker is here. In just about 30 seconds, we will be beginning the next session. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We are at Tapas Project Shala's last day. It is my pleasure to ask our dear Anirudh, who is a learner at Tapas, to introduce our next speaker. Anirudh?
Uh, Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, afraid my microphone was not working. So, so I am happy to be here, and shall I start introducing? So today I take the opportunity of introducing Mr. Vardhan Kabra.
So, having studied across 11 schools in India and abroad across many education systems, Vardhan studied at IIT Bombay and IIM Ahmedabad. In 2004, he co founded Fountainhead School, Surat, shaping it into a prestigious IB institution with over 2,200 students. Having taught across all the three IB programs, Vardhan has a deep understanding of the IB philosophy and pedagogy. His adept leadership ensured a seamless transition to online and hybrid learning during the challenging COVID 19 pandemic. His expertise extends to curriculum development and the of establishment of efficient administrative systems. His visionary project, the Maverick Learning Center, consistently achieves remarkable results in project based learning. Vardhan is also a renowned author known for his book Reimagining Indian Education, offering a visionary perspective on India's educational future. His advocacy work includes serving as the FICCI Arise Gujarat State Chair, with contributions to two white papers on educational reforms. He has also been volunteering with the Education Department in Gandhinagar, where he helped shape the concept of residential schools of excellence.
Thank you, Anirudh, for that. And a very, very warm welcome, Vardhan. And I'm currently reading your book. There it
Thanks,
is.
Preeti. Thanks, Anirudh, for the lovely introduction.
Thank you, Anirudh. Over to you, Vardhan.
So I think Anirudh has already started off sort of the conversation, and I heard the last bit of the conversation with the panel with Mansi and the others, and I felt that, I mean, I think the direction in which this audience is makes a lot of sense. The of course, Tapas, I've looked up what Tapas Project Shaala is doing, and I think the broad conversation is very much in the direction that we have been moving at Fountainhead, and what the book also talks about in a big manner. So let me give a little more background on what we've been doing, and then I can go on to speak about why project-based learning to me is the future of education, and then what we've been doing about it, and what the results look like at this point of time. So my co-founder Ankita is my batchmate from Ahmedabad. We started with a preschool in 2004-5 in Surat, and then we started an IB school in 2008. Our whole intention of being in education was to make it child-centered. Having given a lot of competitive examinations ourselves, obviously the education that we got in terms of at least the degrees had value, but in terms of the actual educational outcomes in most of our schooling, and then I can especially speak about myself, having studied in multiple schools, and even at engineering, I felt was underwhelming in terms of the educational experience. And then my most memorable educational experience was outside of school at a inter-university center for astrophysics and astronomy in Pune, where I did a summer project, summer internship, where we actually worked on some very interesting ideas in astronomy, and learned a lot of science and maths, specifically trigonometry, uh, uh, which often we keep asking where we're using it. So anyway, so that was the motivation to make education very child centered, and to make education very child centered. The whole uh, exercise of understanding the various philosophies which are in that direction, and I see a bunch of them mentioned on the Tapas website also, whether it is Vygotsky, Dewey, Peter Gray, and so many other people, J. Krishnamurti, all of these stalwarts of education. So I think with our preschool and then with the school, the IB seemed the most most student-centered education in terms of their philosophy, in terms of the pedagogy, and that's what we started off in 2008. We started off small with only the PYP, and then over the last 15 years, now with this is our 16th year, finishing 16th year, we've run the PYP, MYP, and the diploma program. We also ran the Cambridge for some time, for 5-6 years, and I see that Tapas is also planning to do that along with NIOS. Uh, so, and then we have nearly 20 to 50 students at this point of time who are only doing the IB. And what we also realized, what I especially got into is to understand that, okay, where can we go next? And the IB is very student centered. I mean, if you look at as a comparison to especially the Indian national boards, and I would say even in comparison with the Cambridge, Cambridge doesn't get into the pedagogy so much. Cambridge is essentially an examination board, so to that extent it's up to the school as to what the school can do in that context. So I think that's where we've been in our journey. And I then want to talk about where the book that I wrote, I mean, Reimagining Indian Education, which Preethi just showed a few minutes back, is essentially a commentary on where we stand, what are the problems that we have in our education system, and what are the solutions to it. And the solution that I talk about in terms of pedagogy is moving towards a lot of project-based learning and self-directed learning. So something that was evident in the conversations that have been happening at this forum, as well as the learners themselves who've been talking about their own experiences. But I think it is important to look at what the major issues are. And I think all of us recognize that the one of the largest issues with the way curriculum is framed, that there is way too much emphasis on rote memorization. What I want to add to that is that there is way too much fixed content as well. The and it is and we do this workshop with all our parents as they come in, and give them a quiz of across subjects, which are limited to, maybe I would say, grade 7 8 sort of questions. And what we see is that they all fail miserably in answering those questions. They just don't remember. And there is another part which is called an application based question. And I ask, this is my sort of favorite question from, and I quote that in the book also, is, where have we ever used a quadratic equation in our life? And then which is, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and you solve for x. I mean, there are 4-5 different methods of doing it, all of which we are expected to master in our schooling. But the real problem is that we have never learned where to apply it, because it's not part of the curriculum. Subjects are all boxed in their disciplines. Very little understanding of how they actually work towards real world issues, I mean, or solving real world issues. And then without that context, without that application, students are not going to be able to remember any of that, other than for being able to give exams. I mean, other than that, it has very little value. And I think that is, to me, the biggest mindset change that has to happen. The NEP has done that to an extent where it says that, I mean, less is more. It needs to be, education needs to be conceptual, exams need to be conceptual. But the NEP is and it is a fantastic policy document, but it is a policy at this stage. The implementation of it still requires a significant amount of work. And then while the NCRT and the CBSE are moving in that direction in reducing content, have already done that maybe by like 20-30%, but a lot more needs to be done in that context. And then you can take a lot of other examples, like most of history that we've learned, especially the way we've learned it, is pretty useless. The way we've learned science, I mean, by mugging up definitions and just mugging up formulas, doesn't really make us science, because science is about experimentation, is about hypothesizing, it's about designing experiments, it's about evaluating, running those experiments, observations, evaluating where you stand, and then going through that whole process again to come up with something. that comes up as a real scientific observation and understanding. I mean, if you don't know how to how to use the scientific method effectively, you've not really learned science. And obviously, we talk a lot about 21st century skills such as critical thinking, research skills, communication, collaboration, and all of those, creativity, all of those things. And very little of that is evident in the way we do curriculum. So what is interesting is, and I know I'm sure that the much of the audience here is already looking at progressive education, but the reality is that parents across the spectrum today do understand that uh, the way we've been taught. And if you ask them what are those things that make people successful and happy, the answers to it is all about these broad 21st century skills and attitudes, the ones which I named, and then you can add teamwork and leadership and being passionate, being able to set your own goals, very most of them being non-tangible, most of them being transferable. Doesn't matter which particular field your child is going to be working in, but all of these are skills and attitudes that are necessary for the future. So when parents understand this, the problem that lies there is that schools, there aren't schools which are focusing on this, and even if they're trying, most schools don't have the conviction that if you stick to this path, the student will be better off. Because the reality is that college admissions in India are driven either by board marks or by competitive examinations. So therein lies a major dilemma for all the stakeholders, parents, schools, teachers, as to what is it that you can really focus on. How do you really prepare the student for colleges in India? And then, unfortunately, there is no easy answer to that, simply because there aren't enough good quality colleges or progressive colleges which also are looking at admission beyond just board marks or the competitive examinations such as JEE, NEET, or now COET. So there aren't too many, but there are. But there are. The good thing is, in the last 10 years or so, there are a lot more colleges which are offering good quality education, and obviously, those who can afford to go abroad, there is a lot more opportunity that is there. So that is a problem that remains, uh, which is at this point of time, I wouldn't say that there are widely available solutions. But having said that, what is important to recognize is that till say grade 8 or even ninth standard, it's pretty much up to the school, up to the parents to figure out what is it that you want to focus on. How do you build those the right learning environment for them so that they can really thrive? And it is possible, it is very much possible that many of those kids may need to get into say a competitive examination mode, or preparing for the board exams, because that's the demand of the college admissions. But till then, a lot of it is in the hands of the school and the parents as to how they want to treat education, and that's where I think we can, at this point of time, focus on as an education system, as a school, without getting bogged down by the demands of college admissions. Uh, and one thing I'm reasonably sure about is that if the students who have gone through progressive education choose to appear for these competitive examinations or focus on the board examinations, they will do well. And we have examples of that now. So therefore, I'm not just hypothesizing, that I'm speaking from experience. We've had 8 of our batches graduating. A bunch of our kids have left to prepare for the JEE and NEET after 10th standard, and we have got some very good results from them. I mean, in the sense that we've got like a JEE 20 top 20 rank, as well as top 100, top 500, so on and so forth. So and they've gone to engineering colleges, and of course, I'm not even talking about those who can afford to go abroad, because then there is absolutely very little limitation in terms of the kind of options that are available to you, irrespective of the kind of education that you come from. So, if the students can do really well, then what is it that we can do and we can change is what we can then talk about. And here maybe I'll talk about our own experiment. See, the IB, as I said, is already quite progressive, and uh, what however I felt is that a little bit of or rather it doesn't allow the kind of agency or the exploration that kids need to do. The primary years program, I think, is reasonably well structured, so a lot of wide range activities happen. So our focus, so 5 years back we started with the Maverick Learning Center, which was essentially a self-directed project-based learning center, and we focused on the middle school and the high school rather than on the primary. And we So today there are about 60 kids in that age group. It's a mixed age learning, primarily project-based learning. The only two timetable subjects are maths and English. That also, wherever possible, it is integrated with the projects that they're doing. The projects themselves are of broadly two kinds. I mean, they are spread across 8 baskets, which include leadership and a passion and design and tech and sciences and humanities and arts, language arts, or and maybe something else if I missed out. Uh, but they could be either facilitator-led projects or they could be student-led projects. And then the broad idea there is that it's a gradual release of responsibility for the students, as and when the students are able to demonstrate that they have the capability and the attitude, I mean, to work on a project on themselves. Then they take more and more of their own projects, and they have to pitch their own project to the mentors, to the facilitators, and get an approval for it. Otherwise, if they are unable to do that, or they don't want to do that at this point of time, maybe someone is really good at design and tech but doesn't want to make that effort for language art, they can just join a facilitator-led project. And in a facilitator-led project, they could be doing a drama production together. They could be doing a graffiti in the school, or they could be doing or they could be making a telescope together or a greenhouse together. It could be a bunch of, or they could be working with the Surat, the municipal corporation of the city, in on say the river conservation or a wet lake conservation. So many projects that our own students have been doing over the last 5 years. The So this is the broad model that happens. There is a lot of course, camaraderie. It's because it's mixed age. There's a lot of learning with peers, with older kids, a lot of events that these kids put in to showcase what they're doing, but also to engage the rest of the school, and the parents and the wider community. Uh, in fact, very recently, this project, which took almost a year, our students interviewed about 20 small and medium businessmen from Surat, and then put together a businessman of Surat book and released it just a month back. So and all of it, from the interviews, identifying to interviews to editing, to putting to publishing, everything was done by the kids, of course supported by the facilitators. But that's and these 20 people like have had great appreciation for the work that has been done, and that book is now available on Amazon and Flipkart. And then is a landmark for Surat in terms of identifying businesses which were not in the radar. Obviously the bigger ones were in the radar of people, but these are like the smaller ones. Like there is a person who runs a multiple Dabeli centers, this Dabeli Vada Pav sort of centers, so very first generation sort of an entrepreneur. So all of these, I think, have been fantastic learning experiences for us, and it shows that students at that age can also take up, I mean, their own learning in their own hands. Obviously they can, but can they do it in a framework and a system? And that's something that we've been able to see. The
But then,
interesting thing also yeah, go ahead with you.
so sorry, there's a question that has come up, and I think this is the
Yeah,
right place for me to ask you
correct.
to answer this.
Yeah.
It's you gave real world and actual anecdotes from your school of how project-based learning is implemented and students are thriving. To
Correct.
paraphrase this question, where the question is, why do you feel PBL is the most suitable pedagogy for today? Maybe paraphrase it for asking why you chose this to be the way forward for Fountainhead, and what was your thinking?
So I'm I will not compare a lot with, I mean, within Fountainhead, but I will look at it from a larger lens and talk about the fact that, see, traditional education that all of us are familiar with, students are like tourists on a guided bus tour. They are seeing the world through a window. That's essentially what they are doing. I mean, they're passive. I mean, and you understand this quite well. They're passive passengers. I mean, in their own journey. PBL, on the other hand, transforms them into explorers, trekking through the jungles of real world problems, issues, and climbing, and then they have to figure out, I mean, innovations, climbing mountains of innovation. So now that, I think, in the fundamental transformation that needs to that is happening, that has already happened with respect to the world of work. World of work really needs people who can navigate real world issues in all their complexities, and come up with innovation, have their own drive. Now that's very clearly the kind of people who are thriving, whether it is a job or whether it is their own work that they're doing. I mean, whether it is a small business, self-employed, whatever it is that people are doing today. Now, what is very clear is this is the kind of people that you need, that our kids need to be. For that to happen, PBL is probably, one of the best framework that I am aware of. I mean, learning is driven by students' own curiosity, and their ambition to solve real world problems. And these problems may not be large ones. They may be, depending on the age group, it could be a very small problem around them. Like our grade 7 8 students had to pick up. They were doing business, and then they said, okay, let's maybe we can also start our own business, but before doing that, can we help small businesses around us to improve their bottom line, improve their web presence, improve their social media presence. And so 35 students each picked a small vendor around them. It could be a vegetable vendor, it could be a iron wala person, or a barber, or whoever. I mean, someone very 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 local to them. And then they worked with them over a 3-month period to improve their presence, their education, their communication, all of those things. And many of them were able to improve. Like, maybe if they were earning 20,000, they went up to 25,000, and so on and so forth, just because they had basic interventions, which, of course, kids who can communicate well or on social media can do quite well with them. So
Right.
when you're doing this, then obviously you are learning all of those things we spoke about, 21st century skills and attitude. But this can only be done where you allow students a lot of time in school and outside of school. If you are bogging them down with uh, 10 subjects, exams happening every other day, expecting them to do really well in each of those, then they just neither do they have the time, nor do they have the inclination to be able to do that. And then obviously, then the judgment from the parents also is about, then it becomes about how well they are scoring. What we've
Correct.
seen is that with the PBL method, it does require a lot of alignment of parents,
Hmm.
because obviously the moment you look at a very non-traditional education, your assessment, the way you look at your child also changes. And I know there was a conversation about how much time parents need to spend, but I can get to that a little later.
Absolutely. And I love the example that you gave where they made an impact in the lives of the local business communities. And just seeing
Correct.
that impact itself makes that learning so much more real. It's
Absolutely.
much better retained because that solution that they have devised is after a lot of research. They've done so much of work. So that learning is for life. There is a question, Vardhan, that from
Yeah.
Mansi, that you come from a very traditional education system. So, how did this change in mindset happen, or was it because of it, or despite it? So, if you can,
I think both because and despite it. I mean, and I'll give the difference there. I mean, the schooling, most of my all of my schooling was pretty traditional. I've been to some of the not so great schools in India, but also some of the best schools in India. So, having done that, I've seen that. I mean, the education just becomes, especially beyond this grades 7 8, but in most schools even there, it's basically about getting good marks in the board exams. I mean, that's essentially what the finally the objective of the schooling becomes. Now, of course, even the board marks are becoming less and less relevant, and it's so much focused on the competitive examination, which I also went through. And I mentioned that my most interesting educational experience were outside of school. So now, therefore, the sense that education needed to be a lot more was something which was very strong with me as I went through my own education. I was By the time I was in ninth and 10th, I was essentially just reading maths textbooks and going and giving exams. I mean, without really engaging with maths in any meaningful manner. Maths can be, and I like maths, but the way the maths was done, I mean, and maths was taught was very, very pedantic, very, very, I mean, boring. I mean, if nothing more than that. The engineering experience that I went through was also similar. There is way too much, and I understand that's also the case mostly today, that the either the courses, and maybe apart from a few disciplines like computer science and electronics, electrical engineering, most of the other disciplines are outdated in terms of they're not in line with what the market requires. So students have very little interest in actually looking at doing those engineering disciplines. They're there for the brand,
Yeah.
uh, much like I was, and most of the students today are, and therefore the jobs that come out of it. So therefore, you're not really engaging in engineering. You're not really solving any engineering problems. And the reality is that I think 80-90% of IITians have nothing to do with their core engineering post once they get their degree. They're just switching altogether. So what it is telling us is that the education really has nothing to do with the core education has nothing to do with the success of all of these people. Yes, these people are very bright. They've come through a big grind. They have a good broader educational experience. So I learned a lot at my IT experience beyond the classroom. So all the events that I organized, or participated in, the interaction that I had, the few internships that I did of my own, are the ones which really built my. I mean, I organized like a large technical festival called Tech Fest. I mean, so those were the things that I really learned from. The one
Absolutely.
bright spot, and is the IM education, which I felt was very, very hands-on. It was I wouldn't say hands-on, but I would say case study based. So therefore, it was a lot more experiential, lot more realistic, and that I felt is something that makes a lot of sense. I mean, of course, for older student that makes more sense. For the younger the student is, it needs to be a lot of hands-on, a lot of experience, a lot of being there in the real world. It is a little more abstract, I mean, at that age, but that is okay. That at that age, abstract is okay, but we still have to do a lot more projects, and working with doing an internship. So I think those were the reasons, and I feel that obviously a very few students can go to an IIT IIM. So and then those who can get there, fantastic for them. What happens to the rest of our India? Rest of
Yeah.
India is, I mean, so do we say that they don't get good education in that case? So that is a paradigm that we need to change from schooling itself, and that's the a long answer to a short question.
No, and it was a very, very valid answer as well. I know that I am changed a little bit of your perspective on education. We share a common mentor in Professor Sunil Handa, and that's something that I
Absolutely.
treasure a lot from IIM Ahmedabad. So, what you've been saying has sparked quite a few questions. This particular question, I think, is a great segue for what you mentioned just now. A lot of students say that they're not good at math and science, and so they are labeled as not being smart enough. So, as an IITian, how would you address that?
I think the problem is with the way the teaching happens. I think maths and science can absolutely be exciting and interesting, but if it is looked at as a series of problems, abstract problems with respect to, especially for maths, and science becoming a set of definitions and formulas and the periodic table to memorize, that is not maths and science. I mean, that is not how any good mathematician or scientist does not do maths or science like that. I mean, they engage deeply with maths and science. They look at, I mean, of course there is abstract mathematics. I mean, those who do, and we'll keep that aside because that happens at college and postgraduate level. but much of maths which can be done till grade 6 7 can be applied around you, and that is the angle it has to take. The reality is that application in teaching of maths is nowhere there. And I ask this question in whichever forum I get. Something as simple as LCM and HCF. All our kids in grade 5, 6, 7 learn it, but have no clue as to where it is applied beyond learning that. And there are some simulated problems, like, I mean, if a baker has to pack a number of cakes and sweets into a box, what sort of arrangement would he do? I mean, no baker worth his salt will ever use LCF or HCM to do that calculation. I mean,
Yeah.
that's nonsense. That's
Yeah.
nonsense. I mean, and that's true for a plus b square is equal to, a square plus 2 ab plus b square, and so on and so forth, all of the maths that we have done. So without the application of it, so we have to reduce content. So what I'm very clear about is also, with respect to both math and science and all subjects, content has to be reduced. You cannot be expecting students to learn so much content and also then master it and really engage with it in terms of application. So it has to be reduced. What Once it is reduced, what is remaining has to be really engaged in a very realistic sense. So science, if they're doing photosynthesis, they have to do a 6-week project on photosynthesis, looking at the best conditions to achieve photosynthesis, light conditions, soil, water, which plants thrive better in what sort of conditions. They have to do all of that, make up their own experiments, look at local species, and then come up with understanding of what are the best ways of doing photosynthesis. That's when they learn science, and this is a process which all students will enjoy, irrespective of their natural aptitude towards maths or science. I mean, if science just becomes learning and mugging up and giving answers, then that's not going to work for most students.
So again, that means that we reduce the breadth and we go deeper, increase the depth of how we're learning so that it's meaningful. That's fabulous.
Correct.
So thank you
Correct.
for sharing that. This is one comment that I put up a bit earlier as well, that this parent wants to know, how can we make PBL more traditional? Like, this has to be the norm. How can we reach this word out? I think that's exactly what we are trying to do, Vibha, here.
Um, yeah, no, I think this is one of the ways of doing it. But if you ask me, I think the biggest challenge with it is that uh, it will that conventional education competition with conventional education is going to continue being there. It's not going to go away anytime soon, and it's going to be very, very challenging to compete head to head with a conventional education. So and they are apples and oranges. I mean, comparison between these two models on, say, a grade, what grades or what outcomes you are going to achieve, say, is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge in most cases. Like, especially if you look at, okay, board mein marks kitne aaye. I mean, if that's the final, if that's the only thing, or you're looking at placements in colleges, then it's going to be a challenge, because firstly, that requires a 14-15 year period for results to be shown. Only then can you actually do the comparison. My hypothesis is, and as I said, we have some examples, but I also have examples of our own Maverick Learning Center students who did project based learning for 4 years, then appeared for the 10th board examinations. And well, I wouldn't say not all of them appeared, because they some of them were very clear we want to continue doing the PBL method. But out of those who appeared, like 7 of them out of 10, they did average to well above average as compared to the rest of the cohort which was doing the 10th board examinations.
Great.
It does help that the MYP, the IB MYP assessments are very skill based. So there is a common thread that goes there. It's not rote memorization based. But my sense is that a student who has learned self direction, who's learned, I mean, how to focus on a task over a period of time, and makes up his or her mind, to say that, okay, no, I need to give this board examination because I need this to be able to get to somewhere that I've made up my mind to be. I would say that 80% of them will do a good job at that. So I think that is the problem that all of us will face in talking about PBL. PBL till, say, a smaller age group, uh, everyone will say, "Ha, okay, makes sense." This is, and any educated, aware parent will be happy to take that up. Even they will need a lot of conviction. Even they will need a lot of conviction, and we call it like periodic doses of alignment. I mean, that is required. That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
required, because the moment you get into comparison, and there is FOMO, those kids are learning so much. They're already writing this much. I mean, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that is something that we have to be very conscious about, because this is not a easy choice to make. So we have to keep revisiting those choices and say, yes, you're okay, you've done
Correct.
something different, but it's okay. You know. There's another question from Mansi. She's asking if PBL is meant for parents who have a lot of time, or can parents who have very little time, and even students who are not self-starters, do you think they will be a good fit for PBL?
Um, I think intent needs to be there. If we say, and I'm talking first for students' viewpoint, then I'll talk about parents' viewpoint, and then I'll give an example. I mean, I'll give a example very close to home. My own son, who's now in 11th, started off with the Maverick Learning Center in grade 7, and he did it for a year, and then realized that this is far more work than what he wanted to do. So then he said that I don't want to continue doing this. I'm happy. I mean, being in a more structured, and of course, the MYP is still far better than conventional education. So we are happy. I mean, overall as a choice. So we didn't want to contest or say that, why don't you stick to this sort of thing. But we were okay with that, because we realized that uh, uh, not every kid will have the self motivation to be able to do that.
Right.
Even if the self motivation may not be there present in terms of, this is exactly what I want to explore, this is what I want to do, these are my ideas, uh, but at least the intent has to be there, that okay, I want to figure out what I want to learn, what I enjoy learning. I think without that intent, I feel that it will be very challenging for students to be in a self directed or a PBL sort of a format. I mean, then as facilitators or parents, you need to keep running behind them, and it defeats the whole purpose of being in that sort of model. And I wouldn't say that's the only answer. Maybe my experience or our experience is limited, and there would be examples of students who would, and I know there are examples of our own students who have done, I mean, in parents word, time pass for 6 months or a year, and then suddenly bloomed after that. Not achieved anything, completely wandering, meandering, thoda kuch liya and khatam hua, nahi samajh mein aaya. Very very shallow work, but maybe 6 months, a year down the line, they figured out, okay, this is what I really want to do, and worked on that particular model. So that's one part. I think from a parent's viewpoint, I don't think, I remember I heard part of the conversation, the previous one. I don't think it is about time, as most of you were saying. I think it is about the intent and the whatever conversation that you have in the limited time that you have. How
Hmm.
do you spend that particular time? If the limited time that you have, you keep asking ki, अरे कुछ नहीं किया अभी तक, where are your, where are the achievements, other students are doing so many fantastic projects but you've not done anything, then that is not going to work. I mean, as a parent, you need to give them the time and space. As a parent, maybe yes, if you can support in terms of time, in terms of creating opportunities from them, taking them out for explorations, even doing things at home, that's great. Nothing like it. I mean, if you can do that. But uh, the fact that parent doesn't have a time doesn't mean that the student cannot do a PBL. In fact, by
Right.
definition, I would say that PBL should be, because it is very child centric. Most students, if they start off at the right age, the kind of age that Tapas is starting with, then most students will continue on that journey quite well. If the parent alignment is there, to a large extent, I don't want to say 100% because that's not going to happen, but to a large extent.
I agree, and I think we have students from different socioeconomic backgrounds who are part of Tapas, and we see that the parent, of course, is probably not as tuned in, but definitely wants to provide what's best for their child. In fact, we have a couple of first generation learners as well, so the parents have not
That's
even
right.
gone to school. So it's great to see that the conversations are still very engaging, because I think these learners have figured out how to ask the right questions, have great conversations. So I think it's really gratifying to see that we're enabling students to be able to think rather than just learn by rote. And so it's not meant for a particular type of society. It's meant for everybody. Everybody who values the child and who respects the child. I think this will work for everybody.
I mean, I agree with that. I endorse that viewpoint. I think the parents where the biggest transformation is required is that middle category. The
Hmm.
coming from humble backgrounds actually recognize the value of practical, uh, progressive education as a intuitive sense. The ones who have money can anyway afford to figure out where their kids will go, despite whether or not their kids get great marks in school. They have many opportunities for their kids at home, I mean, in their businesses, or for college going abroad. The ones who are in the middle are the ones who are most conflicted. They recognize that education needs to change, but don't have a meaningful pathway, or meaningful, route to success for their kids, and that they are the ones who struggle the most.
I agree, and I think I'm hoping that more and more conversations like this will help the parents who want to make these decisions, and I hope that we are able to reach out to a lot more parents. Um, as I'm reading through your book, and I do endorse the same thing, where the breadth has to be lesser, the kind of content that children are going through has to be lesser. There is also a viewpoint that unless students are exposed to all this during the school years, the way they think might not be as molded. So exposing them to this kind of information, whether it's history, or you also give the example of a quadratic equation, right? So where are we going to use it, or like the LCF and LCM and HCF methods? If we don't expose them to these at the school level, the way they think um, might not be as effective. What is your reaction to that?
See, I think it's a uh, this is a thought process, or this is the paradigm espoused by the curriculum makers. And if you are a history professor or a maths professor, they are the ones writing the curriculum. For them, every bit of information, every concept or topic is really really important. I mean, they can't do away with it, and for them to do away with it is like a crime. uh, uh, Having said that, the reality is that most adults neither remember nor care about the 99% of those facts and information, and they've never used it. They will never use it, and I don't think their opinions are informed by the ability to fail at doing quadratic equations effectively, because that is the case for majority of us. I mean, we've not really done well at maths, or science or history, or all of them together. I mean, some are good in some subjects and bad at really other subjects. Only a few of us have been really good at all subjects, right?
Yeah.
So so the reality is that the engagement is very shallow. The engagement, so when we talk about reducing breadth, the idea is to do a little less but engage deeply in it. So I'll give an example. When we talk about history, when we do say ancient civilizations, just memorizing 10 different ancient civilizations, some facts and information about that, has very very little value. But you take up a few and engage with them deeply. I mean, let's say you take up Mohenjo-daro, Harappan, which is very much Indian, which is Indian subcontinent, and then you visit a site which is close to you. You talk to experts in that area. You do your own research around it, to understand what are those connections between ancient civilizations and life today. What systems were progressively taken? What contributed to the rise and fall of those civilizations? And then maybe you do one more as a, yeah, your own interest project, and someone might take the Greek civilization, and someone might take the Persian civilization, and so on and so forth, just out of interest. You do that, and you've done a lot of deep work and have developed the exposure of a lot of that whole medieval or pre medieval era. This is pre Middle Kingdom sort of thing. So you need to do slices of it, but those slices that you do it in deep. That's what is necessary. I mean, science also does not require you to memorize all of the, say, 18 chapters in CBSE. I mean, that's typically the number of chapters, and then a lot of those chapters are anyway repeated each year on year. The same air, water, and forest is repeated exactly with slightly more content the next year. I mean, it's very little value addition in reality, with very little actual gain of scientific knowledge. If you do few experiments each year, few projects each year, build something that, I mean, like I give the example of building a greenhouse, because some of the kids said, okay, orchids don't grow in our weather. How can we make that happen? How can we make that happen? So you need to control the temperature, humidity, sunlight, etc. Okay, so how do we do that? We make a greenhouse. How do we do an automated greenhouse? We need to use sensors and an Arduino. We need to program all of it. What material do we need to use? You're doing design, you're doing science, you're doing experimental skills, you're doing everything that is around it, but you're doing it in depth. Are these kids going to have, are going to be much, do they have much better exposure with respect to science and the world around them? I have no doubts about it that they are far better informed than any of their peers who've done 18 chapters of mugging up all of that information that's in that science textbook. And then I'm happy for, the reality is that anyone who's making this claim, there is no research backing up their claim. It is purely based on opinion. It is
Yeah.
purely based on opinion that because itna sara kiya hai, so therefore they have so much more exposure. Show the evidence of it, then I'll say, okay, I'm wrong. Then I'll say that we are wrong and maybe you are right. But there is no evidence of it.
I agree, and I think you just described our 1 year's curriculum of what we did with IVC. We did the Indus Valley Civilization for a whole year, and the way the projects shaped up. So the burning question was, can we learn from the city planning of Indus Valley Civilization and build our own city?
Exactly.
How would it look? So
Exactly.
this burning question led to such fabulous explorations that we have done. So I completely endorse what you're saying, that the deeper the immersion, better it is. So right now they are looking at how the astronomers during the Indus Valley civilization looked at the celestial objects. So we are looking at the introduction of the celestial objects not from the context of a science textbook, but from the context of Indus Valley civilization. So I think it's really interesting if.
And what we, so just, I mean, coincidentally, our students put together a telescope in the last 3 months,
Wow.
with the interest, because there were a bunch of students who were interested in space and astronomy. They said, we want to do this, and doing it yourself. Of course, you can buy ready-made telescopes and view the stars, but the joy of making your own telescope, learning the optics behind it, learning, I mean, the physics of uh, how celestial objects move around, when do we observe, I mean, is completely altogether different. It's not connected to the ancient civilization, but that's a possible idea that you can take up, I mean, as a
Absolutely.
further going, depending on the students who have the capabilities to do so, or the
So
interest to do so.
I will reach out to you after this sometime, Vardhan, for you to share. Maybe we could connect the students and let them talk about what they've learned
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. So I think we're almost out of time. I know that we kind of overshot the previous session, so I'm having to balance it out a little bit here. So this has been a fantastic conversation, and I am reading your book and I'm learning so much from it. I do recommend it for anybody who's looking at transforming education. So just going to pop the book back up and say, this is the book you guys should be reading if you are looking to make any change at all, any difference in the field of education. So, Vardhan, thank you so much for making the time. It has been a pleasure, and we will be in touch and have a lot more meaningful conversations.
Thanks, Preeti. Thank you for inviting me. Fantastic conversation.
Take care. Bye bye. Now, hasn't this been an interesting day 4 of Tapas Project, Shala? We've started off with a panel discussion where we had such insightful stories, experiences shared by not just the Tapas learners, the parents, but everybody on the panel. And then we had Mr. Vardhan Kabra sharing so much of information about how today's learning should look like. Now, we come to the last session of our third Tapas project, Shaala, with none other than Preethi Vickram, our very own founder of Tapas. And we have our learner Arjun here to introduce her. Hi, Arjun. Good afternoon. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please introduce.
Preethi Vickram founded Tapas Education, a master franchisee Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana for Poda Jumbo Kids. Inspire, nurture, transform. These three words define Preethi Vikram personal motto and journey. She is a committed educator and exponent of learning to play. A person, a, a
You can skip to the next line, no problem.
parenting coach, a change character style leadership mentor, and a brand champion with a central desire to make that catalytic difference in the lives of children and consequently the world at large. Preeti Vikram is a passionate educationist and coach. She has authored a who has trained teachers, coached parents, and worked with government bodies in shaping policy. She is also a serial entrepreneur, having built three successful business and education. Preeti Vikram is an IIMB alumna, currently pursuing her PhD in school leadership. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Arjun, for that introduction. And we welcome onto stage Preethi Vikram.
Hey, Arjun, thank you so much for that. You
You're
learned so much
welcome.
something new about me today. Thank you. We'll meet in school on Monday. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you. It has been an eventful 4 days, including today, and I think it just feels almost anticlimactic that I am speaking the last in Tapas Project Shaala because I hate for it to end, and I don't think that we are ready for it to end yet. What I will be doing for the next 30 minutes or so is try and talk about how the brain develops and what PBL does in terms of how the brain develops. Very important for parents and educators to understand a little bit more about the brain and what that development looks like in order to plan our activities in the classroom or at home much better. So, what I will do is talk about seven fascinating facts about how the brain learns. And if we know that these are the seven fascinating facts, then what can we do at home or at school? So this is something that I will be doing. What I want to also do is have a couple of interesting polls, and I would hope that in between you're able to answer the questions that I'm putting up. So let's try and keep this as engaging as possible, right? So the first fact that I wanted to introduce you to. Before the first fact, let me ask you a question, right? The question, and I want you to answer this question using um, this particular this particular slide, so we are able to all see each other's answers. So you can take out your phones or any of the any gadget that you have, scan the QR code and answer this question. How many senses do you think human beings have? When I say we, it's human beings. How many senses do you think we have? Five senses, or I think I have sixth sense too, so there are six senses, or maybe eight senses. Is that even possible? Like, is that possible? So scan the QR code and answer this question. If you're not able to scan, you can use menti.com, use this code, and you will still be able to answer. Somebody has responded, and we have five senses. That's the answer that we've got so far. Anybody else who's looking to answer this question? How many senses do you think we have? Do we have five senses? Or no, I have sixth sense too, like I'm really perceptive, so maybe it's six senses. Or is it eight senses? What's the popular response? Okay, two people responding saying it's five senses. In the interest of time, I'm going to say yes. A lot of us think that we have five senses, but here is an interesting fact, right? Four people have responded that it's five senses. Clearly the answer that everybody thinks is right, and then somebody has said it's I have the sixth sense too. Okay, a couple of more seconds for you to respond. Two people thinking six senses is the right answer. And let's name the senses that we are thinking of. So we have the sense of sight, sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of hearing, and what am I missing? Um, what am I missing? The sense of sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. So these are the five senses that we have, that we all know about. Some people are saying I'm very perceptive, so I have sixth sense, so there's probably six senses. And there is one very, very interesting response that there are eight senses. Wow, there's such a difference of opinion in amongst all of us already, right? So it's a very interesting thing that I want to introduce you to. The brain has and responds to eight senses. And it's not just the five senses that traditionally we've been exposed to. And so the three senses that additionally I'd like to talk about is the three secret agents that we have, which is called proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. Now, it might seem like really large words when I'm saying that there are these three senses and it's the first time you're hearing them, but hear me out, okay? So, apart from these five senses, the brain also has these additional three senses which are related to the way that we function as a human being, the body that the human body that it functions as in relation to the environment that we have. Proprioception is all about understanding our relationship with the space around us. For instance, if a child has to jump or you have to jump, how much do you bend your knees in order to get the momentum to be able to make that jump? Now, that sense of, okay, it's a small distance, so I'm going to bend a little less, or it's a very large jump I have to make, so I'm going to bend a lot more, is called proprioception. It's understanding how the body functions in the space around us, right? Then there is the vestibular sense. This has everything to do with balance. Now, your vestibular sense, imagine if you're walking on a tightrope. You need to have a particular center of gravity, and understanding the relationship of my head with the rest of the body. So if I have to bend down to pick it up, how is the balance of the body? So it's very critical for the way we talk, we function, the way we are walking, our ability to play certain sports. All of that is dependent on proprioception and the vestibular sense, right? And then there's a very interesting sense called interoception, right? Now, this is something to do with my internal organs. It has to do with how I'm feeling inside. So, when I feel hungry, my body is giving me certain signals. When I'm anxious, my body is giving me certain signals. So these are all senses of how we feel internally. It's about having pain in a certain area, feeling pleasure in certain areas when you're tickled. So these are all senses that we are having, which are built into our body to enable us to perform function much better. Now, why is this important to know? A lot of times, and like the poll that we did, most people assume that we have five, I'm just going to put this up. Most people think we have either five or six senses at the most. We forget that we have, or maybe we're not even aware that we have these additional senses. What does that do? That makes our learning very limited. For instance, if there is a need for me to move in order to develop my proprioception or my vestibular sense, but I'm asked to sit quietly on my desk, at my desk in the school, then that sense is not developing as much. So when I grow up, I don't have a sense of how to move. Maybe I can't dance as well. Maybe I can't participate in sports as well. Maybe I will suffer when I am exercising in future. So a lot of how our bodily functions develop are ignored in our traditional homes and traditional classrooms. I have parents who feel very happy that my child is learning so quickly that he didn't even crawl. Like he crawled in, and in just a month of crawling, he started walking, or she started doing this faster. And so they're very proud of this. But I do want to explain to parents that a crawling, for instance, is a very important aspect of learning this sense of proprioception, right? If the child has not crawled enough, that crossing off the mid doesn't happen, the midline doesn't happen. So for instance, if a child is not able to pick up an object from the right hand on the left side, it means that the child is not able to cross the midline. They are going to switch hands and then pick up. So they will pick up something on the left and then hand it over to the right hand. Now this is a cause of concern. It means that they have limited capacity of bodily functions. The physical development has not happened. So crawling is a great way for them to be able to develop this crossing the midline. Now, why is this important? Again, children who have trouble writing, for instance, who have trouble reading. So, reading means that I have to go from left to right. In most languages, you have to go from left to right. If the child is not able to cross the midline, how will they read? It's going to be difficult for them because their eyes are not able to go from left to right. It's a bodily function. If the child is not able, the child has to write again, they have to write from left to right. They're not able to do it because, for instance, they haven't crawled enough, because the sense of proprioception, the vestibular sense, has not developed as much as it needs to. The body needs movement, and movement happens when children play. So I hope you understand the importance of movement, in especially in the early years. And even as we progress further, these senses, like if you're going to use the sense of sight a lot, your other senses take a back seat. So if you're not going to use the sense of proprioception or the vestibular sense or interoception, they will take a back seat. So even as adults, we need to move a lot more. Sitting is the new smoking, and I think we've all heard that it's so bad for the body. And here is the reason why. This is the reason why the brain will respond in a particular way for not having these senses. Let's move on to the second sense. The second aspect that I want to talk to you about brain development. The second one is hormones in your brain. And I'm thinking most of you have read this particular WhatsApp forward that has been doing the rounds for the couple of years now. There's something called as the happy hormones. This is the term that's given by laymen like us. And what happens when these hormones are released in the brain is that it makes you feel better about yourself. So these are four hormones: oxytocin, endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine. These are the fab four of feels. That's how I call them, that these are the fab four. What happens when when are these hormones released in the body, and when do children and adults feel happy? Oxytocin is released in the body when we are, say, for instance, hugging somebody. It's released through physical touch. It is released when you have proximity. So when you hug your pet, or you're actually playing with your pet, or you're hugging somebody, holding hands, or tickling, these are all ways in which oxytocin is released in the body, right? Endorphins are released when you exercise. So when there's a strenuous physical activity, the body reacts by releasing endorphins. So you feel nice about it. You feel nice about exercising. So you come back to exercising some more. So that's the purpose of endorphins being released. Then there's serotonin. Serotonin is released in the body when you do something that is larger than yourself, like you help somebody, like it's not just about the ego. You've done something bigger and larger than just the regular things that you do. So the serotonin is when somebody is thanking you for something. So that's what serotonin is released. Then we have dopamine. Dopamine is released when you're acknowledged, like when you the pleasure that you get when you hear your notification on your phone that somebody has messaged you, or you've got a notification that somebody has liked your post. That's all dopamine. That's when you're acknowledged, when you matter. That's when dopamine is released in the body. Now think about all of this. If a child is sitting at a desk the whole day, when are these hormones getting released? It's very unfortunate, because we are depriving children of all these hormones that can make them happy. And so when when what happens is when they get acknowledged, it's dopamine, that the hit of dopamine that keeps hitting the brain, right? Dopamine is the most commonly released hormone because all the other three are lacking, and that's the one that we get addicted to. And the addiction to dopamine is what causes addiction later on in life to other drugs and other kinds of addictive substances. So please ensure that children are getting enough of all four in equal quantities. Now, how do we do that? It's a very simple solution: play. Because when you play with children, and I'm saying not just the really young children, even older children like students in 5th, 6th, maybe 10th grade, play is the one short way of ensuring that these hormones get released in the body in equal measure. Like, especially in early years when the children are engaged in rough and tumble play, like they are holding each other and trying to, they're trying to put the other one down. So they're actually being rough with each other. The sense of the oxytocin that gets released in the body is great. Also, the sense of how much should I do this, where should I stop, reading off the other person's responses is all very important. So we have to allow children to partake in rough and tumble play. Now, as they grow older, this can be through sports that they're having, the kind of oxytocin that gets released. Pets are a great way for oxytocin to be released. And just having those connects with other adults, other friends who they can hold hands with, get hugs from. There is a lot of science which talks about playing with your child that releases oxytocins, endorphins, serotonins, and dopamine. So allow children to play, and you play with them so that you're able to get the benefits of these hormones as well. I see that there is a question before I move to the next one. Vibha is asking, what if the child himself went from crawling to walking by 11 months? Is that going to affect in future? Absolutely not. The child, of course, if they are ready for it, they are going to walk, because that's what they see around them. They're seeing other human beings go up on their 2 feet and they walk, right? So it is very natural for the child to walk by 11 months, if their body is ready for it, as long as you have not promoted that walking in any way. But what you need to provide is also opportunities to crawl after they have walked, like play games at home which will make them chase you while crawling. So you can crawl, they can crawl behind you, for instance. Or get them to do a lot of climbing activities, like the every school is supposed to have a climber. Get them to do climbing activities. So when it is the left leg right hand, or left hand right leg, so these are all the ways in which you can do the mimic the act of crawling. So it's okay if the child has by themselves walked, that's not going to be a problem. But you will have to ensure you give a lot of opportunities for crawling. And for other types of it's not just crawling was one of the examples I gave. It's to be able to jump. So you will see that very young children are not able to use both their legs to jump. They will use one foot and they will jump forward. So that shows that the proprioception has not yet developed for them. So give them opportunities to jump. We used to do the skipping rope a lot. It was so great for proprioception and a vestibular sense. But unfortunately, today's children are not getting to skip as much. So these are activities that we can get children to do in order to develop these senses. Okay, I'm going to keep going forward because we've just done two. This is one interesting part of the brain. It's the amygdala, right? I know it sounds a little bit, it sounds so weird to say the word amygdala, but imagine this to be your, if you've traveled by flight, the security that happens, the security check, the amygdala is that security for your brain. Look at where it's placed. It's placed right above the brain stem, that at the top of your spinal cord, right? So any stimulus that your organs or your sense organs are sending first hit the amygdala before it goes to the rest of the brain for processing. Okay, now having given you that little bit of a biology lesson, the amygdala is the one who will prompt the brain if it finds that there is a security breach. That means if it finds that there is any kind of a threat to the ego or the body of the child or the adult, the amygdala goes into the flight, fight, or freeze response. What does that mean? It means that the frontal cortex shuts down, the thinking part of your brain shuts down, and the reacting part of your brain takes over. It means that your body will immediately be pumped with adrenaline. It means that your body is going to go into either a flight, fight, freeze, and there is sometimes a fourth one called flock kind of a response. Let me give you an example. You find that your child is helping you out at home, is carrying a glass of water or milk, and the child is carrying it towards you, suddenly drops it, and that means that there has been a threat. Now, if the child senses that the adult in the room is going to scold them or be upset with them, that is a huge threat for the brain. So, what it will do is make the child give one of these responses. A flight is immediately the child is going to run away from that. They say that, okay, I need to use the washroom or I need to go do this. So, they're going to try and escape from that situation. Then there is the fight. Then there is like, oh, I don't know, there was something on the floor, so I slipped, I dropped it, or I don't care, I'm not going to clean it up. So that's the fight response. Then there's the freeze response, and this is something that many adults also respond with the freeze, where you're just like, okay, what's happening? You don't know how to respond, how to move forward, so you're just frozen in your space, right? And then there is the flock response. The child will go call the sibling or bring in the other parent and say, try and get them to support them. So these are the four responses that automatically are triggered in the brain when there is a threat. Now, apply this in your classroom or apply this at home. If you think that the child is, for some reason, not doing as per what you have said, or the behavior is something different, if you scold or even show like big eyes like mine, right? Like show big eyes at them or threaten them in any manner, their brain is shutting down the thinking part. So, how much ever you ask them to learn after that, it's not going to happen. In a classroom, if there is a threat, the child cannot learn for the next 20 minutes, because it takes 20 minutes for the amygdala to let go and for the prefrontal cortex to take over. So please keep these in mind, that if you are having a safe environment, whether at home or at school or anywhere else, if you're creating that space where the child feels safe, that's when optimum learning happens. Okay, let's move to another question now. I hope that your phones are ready, or these ones are ready, because we have another question. Are you ready? Okay. Hold on, let me ask the next question. Here it is. What are the benefits of playing in nature? You can just type in the words. Again, the same instructions. You can scan the QR code or use the code on top of the screen to log in and just share your responses. What are the benefits of playing in nature? We've all played in nature as kids. So I'm asking you, why do you think that people should play in nature? There's freedom, there is joy. That's great. What else? I'm sure you have played in nature. Have you? Have you climbed trees? Have you run in the fields? Try and put up your responses to what are the benefits of playing in nature. There's freedom, there's joy. Anybody else? Okay. There's happiness by yourself, to be healthy, to enjoy the natural self. Fabulous. These are great responses that I'm getting. Okay, so I am going to move on and bring back my slide. So the next part of what I want to talk about the brain is, apart from our conditioning about what benefits we have in nature, there's a very strong research that shows that physically itself, the construction of the brain changes when you play in nature. There's something called as the nature deficit disorder, and this is very real. This is the research has shown that this is very, very real. Nature deficit disorder causes the hippocampus part of the brain to shrink in size. Now, what does that do, you ask? Hippocampus in the brain is responsible for learning, to go from short-term memory to long-term memory. Okay. Now, when the hippocampus is smaller, in fact, when in during adult life, during old age, the hippocampus shrinking is one of the reasons for Alzheimer's, for dementia, right? So that's the effect of hippocampus. Now, children who have played in nature, research shows that their hippocampus is larger. I mean, just physically, there is proof that there is a reason why we feel better while playing in nature. Engaging with nature, just the sense of, imagine how voice travels within four walls versus how our voice travels when we are in the midst of trees and plants and openness, right? Being within the four walls is causing more anxiety because our children are not getting the same response as they would get in nature, response from the environment, right? So it's extremely important that we give a lot more space for children to learn. The ability to interact more with nature is something that will impact the way that the body develops, the brain grows in this particular manner. So this is scientific proof. This is actual proof of why you need to spend more time in nature. Okay. Then let's look at neuroplasticity. Okay. This is something so interesting. It talks about how the brain is wired, right? I mean, the brain is wired to have connections which are not always connected. There are synapses and the neurons are passing information to one another. What that means is that we can always change the way the brain is responding. It means that the the nature of the brain is that it's plastic. It can be molded, it can be changed at any point of time. So if you're asking me that, say for instance, there was a question earlier, my child did not crawl too much, and it went into walking directly. Is there a problem? That means that no, there is a opportunity even today for making those changes. The neuroplasticity of the brain allows us to keep constantly teaching new tricks to the brain. So use that. I mean, even as adults, you can rewire the way that you are thinking, the way that your brain is learning. Neuroplasticity is something that you can use to your benefit, right? We're done with 5. We just have 2 more things that I want to share with you in terms of how the brain learns. 6th is pruning and revisiting neural connections. Oh, have you seen gardens which are pruned? They look better, right? I mean, if there are gardeners who will go trim the trees and prune it so that if a rose plant is not growing too well, they will remove the branches which are which have dried up, so that the ones which are really not dried up will blossom. That's exactly what the brain does as well. The connections that we are not using are actually pruned out. It means that they are removed. Those connections are not as active. So you're not able to use those connections in the brain. Now, what does this do? What does this mean? If we do not use critical thinking, those get pruned. So we have to meticulously plan for what we want to retain in our brain, right? If you want to develop a growth mindset, for instance, it is something that you have to consciously work towards, so that those connections are there, so that those synapses are active, so that you are able to make the best of it. So you can learn at any point of time during your lifetime because of neuroplasticity, but it also means that you have to be conscious about it, because otherwise the brain is going to remove the parts that we don't use anymore. Vardhan mentioned something so interesting before this, that he said that we're learning so much but we don't ever use that in our life. That's because that information we didn't use it for so long that the brain has pruned it, that information is lost to us because we haven't used it, we haven't revisited it at any point of time. Now, after I speak about the seventh point about the brain and how it learns, I will talk about and relate it to project based learning. So, the seventh one that I would like for you to see is that there are certain schemas of the brain that help in learning. Very simply put, um, based on the experiences that we've had, the senses, the stimulation of the senses that we've had, the brain creates schemas. These are like plans you can think of as that get created in the brain, right? Information is grouped together in particular manners. So these schemas are formed in the brain for segregating and categorizing the information that it's receiving. So that's the purpose of schemas in the brain. Now, when we divide up our subjects into what we learn into subjects, right? Yesterday's session, day before yesterday's session was Raya, who spoke about interdisciplinary learning. If we divide them up into subjects, our learning, they become separate schemas. It means that the child will not have the access to move and look at information in a much more holistic manner. It means that they have to go from one schema to another in order to access that information, right? By helping children look at any information in a transdisciplinary manner, the schemas are a lot more complex. It makes it more easy for children to retrieve information about how they are learning and what they have learned, right? So when we put all of this together, I look at project based learning providing the opportunity for everything that we have discussed so far. Let's go backwards, right? When we look at project based learning, it removes those silos of subjects. It removes the way that children learn is not because it's a subject of history or because it's a subject of science, but they're just looking at it from this view of a question, and from taking that question and looking at what information do I need and going towards problem solving. That is the schema. The problem solving becomes the schema in the brain and not the subject. So that is ensuring that the interdisciplinary nature of learning continues to happen. When you look at project based learning, we are revisiting that information that we have got in one project in multiple other projects, because we have actually used it, we have learned it, we have analyzed it, we have applied it. So the higher order thinking skills have also been developed. Because we are revisiting this information again and again, project based learning ensures that this pruning does not affect the very necessary information that we are having. Project based learning is making sure that children are learning to solve problems. They are having to always question themselves, reflect on the solutions that they've come up with, and then think about newer ways of how we can solve problems. So neuroplasticity is something that becomes second nature to students who are undergoing project based learning. um, I would say the hippocampus and the development and being part of nature, I think not directly related to project based learning, but I think the opportunity of working closer in nature is more with project based learning than any other traditional way of learning. Similarly, when you go back to the amygdala, because it's so child led, to the the threat is reduced. It allows the children to feel confident. The self esteem is a lot more higher when we are looking at project based learning. And then we have the happy hormones and play. Of course, these are very, very high when we are doing project based learning, because we are playing with all information. We are constantly collaborating. We're not just sitting in one place. We are looking at ways to build, construct, take things apart. We are looking at walking, talking, doing a lot more than just a typical classroom where you're seated all the time. And finally, because of the way the nature of project based learning, it allows for us to engage with all 8 senses of learning and not just the traditional 5 senses. So with that, I think I am done with um, Oh, I already connected the essential elements of project based learning. If you have thoughts on what I have said so far, please use the comment section to talk about how you think the points that I presented, the 7 essential facts of brain and how it learns, is related to project based learning. Or you can let me know your other thoughts if you have any. And I am done with my session. I think I kept well within time. Okay, so that's the end of me talking about the brain. This has been a fabulous experience with all of you. And I don't speak just of this particular session. It has been fabulous the last 4 days. We started on the 15th, and it's just been so gratifying to see that we are engaged with all of you. It's been gratifying that all the experts who have spoken endorse project based learning, and then I think we are definitely on the route of creating something so special. So these 4 days have been an exceptional experience. We will be posting all this content for you to view later as well. We will keep reminding you of what we have discussed these 4 days, so that you can learn a lot more and keep revisiting so that you can get more information. So that's us for now. And thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And have a great weekend ahead. I know there's hardly any left of it. I'd like to thank Team Tapas for the fantastic support that they've given during these 4 days. There is one comment. Vibha says that I might have told about this, but my architecture school had all PBL without being called PBL. It's grateful to see such schools exist, and my kids go. Oh, thank you so much, Vibha. Yes, we are grateful to have your kids at our school as well. So thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody. Bye bye.